It's Christmas Eve in so snowy 1800s London, England. And in a small house at the edge of the town, there lived a lonely 7-year-old boy named Isaac. Isaac was a sad child, with not a friend to his name. While most children were spending their time with their families and eagerly looking forward to opening the presents that they were placed with care beneath the beautifully decorated Christmas trees, little Isaac spent this most holy of nights alone in his cold, dusty attic room. Isaac's parents were very poor. His mother was a strict cow of a woman who stayed at home and schooled Isaac. His father worked long hours down in the London harbour to support his family, although a large portion of his earnings went through purchasing and the consuming of copious amounts of alcohol at the end of his shift. Sometimes he would come home drunk after being thrown out of every bar in London and shout at his beloved wife and Isaac's mother. Occasionally, it would escalate to violence, and he would beat her savagely. Then, when he was done, he'd force himself onto her in a drunken sexual rage. As it so happens, this particular night was one of those occasions. Isaac had remained quiet, quivering beneath his soiled bed sheets until the screams and loud bangs sudden. Once poor, frightened Isaac was finally able to sleep, he dreamed of what it would be like to have a friend to play with. So many he could laugh and be happy like the other children in London. Lucky for little Isaac, this Christmas Eve marked a big change when his abysmal loneliness caught the attention of a guardian angel who then crafted a very special gift for this sad little London boy. As the sun rose on that Christmas morning, Isaac opened his eyes to find a strange wooden box sitting at the foot of his bed. His eyes widened with awe. He stared at this colorful, handcrafted box, wondering who had left it. He was not used to receiving gifts, especially toys. What little toys Isaac had were ones that he had found abandoned in the streets or washed up in the gutters. Isaac scooped up from the foot of his bed in front of the mysterious box and picked it up with both hands. The box was beautifully painted in colorful styles with carvings of happy clowns' faces on the side. There was a tag on the box that simply read, "For Isaac." On the top of the box was engraved text. Isaac squinted his eyes and sounded out the words. Laughing Jack in a box? He paused. Laughing Jack in a box? Isaac had heard of a jack-in-a-box, but never a laughing jack-in-a-box. His mind spun with curiosity, and he gasped with his box's metal crank. Isaac turned the crank, and the song "Pop Goes the Weasel" chimed the rhyme with the the chime with the crank's guide. As the song came to its climax, Isaac sang out the last verse. Pop goes the weasel. But nothing happened. Isaac let out a sigh. It's broken. He placed the box back down on the edge of his bed and shifted across his small, dusty room in despair, where he changed out the soiled sleepwear into his usual tattered clothes. Suddenly, Isaac heard a loud rattling noise coming from the bed behind him. He spun around to witness the wooden box violently shaking, and then without warning, the top of the box swung wide open, and a parade of colorful smoke confetti blew out. Isaac rubbed his eyes in disbelief of what he was seeing. As the smoke cleared, there stood a tall, thin, multicolored clown man with bright red hair, a swirly rainbow-colored cone nose, and feathery shoulders that sat on top of his ragged, colorful clown uniform. The technicolored clown spread his arms radically and announced, "Come one, come all, whether big or small, to see the best clown of them all, the one, the only, Laughing Jack-in-a-Box." Isaac's eyes lit up. Who, who are you?" he said. The colorful crane stepped down off of the bed with a happy grin and said, "I'm glad you asked. I am Laughing Jack, your new best friend for life. I'm magical, I never get tired of playing, I'm a whiz at the accordion, and I adapt to your developing personality. In other words, whatever you like, I like." Isaac looked up to the mysterious clown man. We're friends," he stuttered. Jack looked at the boy with a cocked eyebrow. "Friends? We're the best of friends. I was specifically created to be your not-so-imaginary friend, Isaac." Isaac's jaw dropped. You know my name?" Jack let out a whimsical laugh. "Of course I know your name. I know everything about you. So, now that the introduction's out of the way, how about a game of I Spy?" Isaac grinned from ear to ear. "Really? We can play games? I'd love to." "Oh." He paused. I can't. I have to go downstairs to see Mother for homeschooling and chores." His smile faded into a look of disappointment. Jack placed his hand on Isaac's shoulder with a warm smile. "It's okay. I'll be waiting right here for you when you get back." Isaac's smile returned, and he looked up to his new friend. Just then, he heard his mother's shrill voice calling him downstairs. "Well, I gotta go. I'll see you after I'm done, okay?" he said, and his head towards the door. Jack smiled. "Absolutely, kiddo." "Oh, and Isaac." Isaac looked back to Jack, who gave him a wink and said, "You should wear that smile more often. It suits you." Isaac grinned, happy, and he turned away to walk out the door. All day, Isaac told his mother about the amazing, colorful clown man who came in out of a magical box that appeared at the foot of his bed. His mother, however, did not believe a word of it. Finally, he persuaded his mother to follow him to his room, and she could behold the Laughing Jack for herself. They walked up to the stairs, and Isaac swung open the door of his room. "See, Mother? He's right here." Isaac paused as he scanned the room that contained neither magical dancing clown nor mysterious wooden box. Isaac's mother was not amused. She gave Isaac a glare so menacing It made his knees weak and his stomach sick. But, but mother, he was smack. Isaac's mother delivered to him a swift, hard smack across the face. His eyes began to tear up, and his lip began to quiver as he could feel it about to break down. You stupid, insolent child! How dare you lie to me about such childish idiocy? Who would want to be friends with a useless worm such as you? You shall remain in your room for the rest of the evening and shall receive no dinner. Now what you... Now what do you say, you ungrateful whelch? Isaac managed to swallow the knot in his throat to mutter up a reply. Thank you, Mom. His mother glared down at him for a moment, leaving his room in disgust. Isaac kneeled over, burying his face into the side of his bed. Streams of tears ran down his cheeks as he began to weep. What's wrong, kiddo? A voice called out. Isaac looked over from the edge of the bed, where Laughing Jack was now supposedly sitting beside him. Where were you? Isaac muttered. Jack ran his hand down Isaac's hair to comfort him. He softly replied, I was hiding. I can't let your parents see me, otherwise they won't let us play anymore. Isaac wiped tears down his face. Look, kiddo, I'm sorry I have to hide, but I'll make it up to you, because tonight we can play games and have tons of fun, Jack said, smiling. Isaac took up at his vibrant pal and silently nodded, as a small smile began to form in the corner of his mouth. That night, Laughing Jack and Isaac played so many games. With a wave of his hand, Jack made all of Isaac's tin soldiers spring to life and march around the room. Isaac was amazed, and he was watching his toys move around in the room on their own. Then, Laughing Jack and Isaac told each other spooky ghost stories. Isaac laughed as if Jack was a ghost. But Jack explained that no, Isaac asked Jack if he was a ghost. He was more of a cosmic entity of sorts. At the end of the night, Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out an assortment of delicious candy. Isaac was on ecstasy when he popped the first colorful treat in his mouth, as if it were first time tasting something so sweet. Isaac had so much fun and Laughing Jack so hard that night seemed like we were to be finally looking up for little Isaac. At least until the incident that occurred 3 months later. It was a pleasantly warm and sunny day in London, which was a bit of a rainy day. So, with the help of a certain not-so-imaginary friend, Isaac was able to finish his chores early and was allowed to go outside and play for a bit. Things started simple enough. The duo were back behind the house playing pirates when Isaac spotted the neighbor's cat sneaking in the garden. Yar! We got an enemy spy off the starboard bow! Isaac yelled, captivated by the fantasy and imagination. Yo-ho! I'll get some, Captain Isaac! Exclaimed his first mate, Jack, in his best hearty pirate accent. Laughing Jack's arm stretched out across the garden and snatched up the unsuspecting feline, who began to struggle quite vigorously. Don't let him get away, Jackie, or I'll make you walk the plank, Isaac antagonized. Jack's grip on the cat tightened, and his arms grew to extend like anacondas wrapping around themselves, around the wily feline as it struggled for dear life. Jack's arm kept squeezing the animal, pressing the air out of its lungs, and and the once dear house pet's eyes began to bulge out of their sockets. There came a loud snap. Jack quickly released the creature out of his grip. His lifeless furry husk thundered against the ground. There was hush, silence, as the two observed the cat's now twisted and mangled corpse. The silence was finally broken by an uproarious laughter coming from Isaac. Ha 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 ha! Wow, I guess cats really don't have 9 lives. Isaac exclaimed, nearly teary-eyed with laughter. Jack began to chuckle as well. Yeah, but won't you get in trouble if your mother finds out your neighbor's cat is dead in your garden? Isaac's laughter quickly died. Oh no, you're right. I'll just throw it back over the neighbor's yard. Isaac picked Isaac panicked as he grabbed a nearby shovel to scoop up the broken cat before lopping it over the fence, back into the neighbor's yard. They quickly went back inside and up to Isaac's room. About an hour later, it came. The ear-piercing squall of Isaac's mother shrieking his name from downstairs. Neither Jack nor Isaac said a word as he crept down the stairs alone to face whatever horrible fate was coming to him. Jack could hear much yelling from downstairs, but couldn't make out what was being said. After about 30 minutes, a teary-eyed Isaac ascended the stairs back into his room. Well? Jack asked nervously. Isaac just stared at the ground as he spoke. I tried to tell her it was you who hurt the cat. She didn't believe me. Said you weren't real. Jack frowned, knowing that it was all his fault. Isaac used his sleeve to wipe his tears. I'm being sent off to boarding school. I'm leaving tonight. And you can't come with me. Laughing Jack's face turned into shock. What? I can't come? Where will I go? Isaac said nothing but pointed over towards a beautiful colored box where his friend had originated. Back in there? But I won't be able to get out until... Jack paused. Isaac looked up to his only friend with tears streaming down his face. Jack, I promise I'll come back for you as soon as I can. Jack looked at the box, then back to Isaac. And I'll be right here waiting for you, kiddo. Jack smiled as a tear ran down his cheek. He walked over to the box and with a puff of smoke was sucked back in, unable to be free until once again opened. That night, Isaac was off to a boarding school. For the first time, Laughing Jack felt what it was like to be lonely. Even when trapped in his box, Jack was able to see things going on around it. So each day, he waited for his friend to return. And each day, the room grew older and dustier. Laughing Jack's one purpose was to be Isaac's best friend for life. And now he had to wait day after day, month after month, to reunite with his special friend. Isaac's parents still lived in the house, but never came to the upstairs room. The only time they made their presence known was when Jack could hear them fighting. Still, Jack's life became one of solitude, loneliness, and disappointment. As years went by, Jack's once bright and vibrant colors faded to a monochrome blur of pitch black void and stark white emptiness. Trapped all alone, eternal and hopeless. 13 years passed until the night Isaac's father came home particularly drunk and got into an argument with his wife as per usual. Things escalated to physical violence once again. However, this time, she didn't get back up. Isaac's father had beaten his wife to a dead, bloody pulp and was sentenced to hang by the gallows the next day. With both his parents dead, this meant that the now 20-year-old Isaac inherited the dusty old house he'd spent the earlier half of his childhood in. Laughing Jack was quite surprised when he heard his old friend's footsteps walking up the stairs to the attic of his room for the first time in 13 years. However, it was not the reunion Jack had hoped for. Isaac looked different. Not only was he older, but he also seemed to pose an odd, grim look on his face. No longer was he hopeful and curious young boy that Jack first met all those years ago. Jack eagerly awaited Isaac's releasing him from his prison. He had waited so many years. But still, Jack's box sat there, untouched and unnoticed. On a shelf in the corner of his room, with all the other dusty, unwanted knickknacks, Isaac had completely forgotten about his old friend, dismissing it as some early childhood fabrication. Surprisingly, this made Jack feel nothing. He was hollow. 13 years of waiting and disappointment left the monochrome clown void of sorrow and self-pity. Jack remained in his box, colorless and without emotion. The next day, Isaac went off to work at his job as an upholsterer, doing furniture repairs for the good people of London. Jack waited in captivity, hours after a drunken Isaac returned home and stumbled upstairs into his room. But this time, he had a friend with him. It was a lady friend Isaac had picked up from the bar earlier that evening. She was beautiful, with flowing blonde hair, sapphire blue eyes, and a smile that could make his hearts melt. Laughing Jack's attention was drawn to Isaac's guest. "Who is this? A new friend? Why did Isaac need a new friend? I thought I was Isaac's only friend." Isaac thought to himself, from this hellish confinement. Isaac and his lady friend sat down on the bed and chatted about life in London. Isaac made a joke about the weather, and they both laughed. Laughing Jack hissed with envy over Isaac's new friend. Isaac and the girl looked deeply into each other's eyes as they leaned in for a kiss, locking lips with a passionate swirling of tongues in one another's mouth. Jack was repelled by this strange display of affection, for he had never seen kissing before, and as the kissing grew more intense, Isaac ran his hand along the girl's smooth thigh and up her dress. However, his guest just brushed his hand away. Isaac was persistent, though, and once again ran his hand along her smooth thigh and up her skirt, this time planting his hand upon her silky undergarments. The woman took a great displeasure at Isaac's sexual advances and pushed Isaac away before delivering a hard smack across his face. Isaac's eyes darkened as he glared at the woman. This once drunken passion turned into a booze-fueled anger. The woman's heart sped up as he saw Isaac's face boil with rage. "Stupid whore!" Isaac yelled, and he smashed his fist into the girl's face. Laughing Jack's eyes widened when he witnessed the long streaks of red liquid gushing out of the girl's nose. "What game is this?" he thought as his eyes averted to such violent sights. Isaac's firmly clutched the girl's waist, and one hand tore her panties off with the other. The terrified girl turned to fight back, but Isaac overpowered her. He roughly fondled her breast before savagely grabbing her hair and forcing his tongue down the sobbing young woman's throat, who responded by chomping down as hard as she could on Isaac's tongue. Jack watched with widened curiosity as his old friend released a new playtime in clutching the woman's mouth as it filled with warm red blood. The frightened girl fell off the bed and dropped down to the floor as she scurried towards the exit. Isaac quickly lurched around and was able to catch his fleeing playtime by the end of her dress. Reaching back, he widened and led Candace off the nightstand beside him, and with all his might banished into the back of the young woman's head, which burst open like a ripe watermelon. Thick blood splattered across the room as the girl's body convulsed onto the ground several seconds before going completely still. Blood was everywhere. Some droplets even managed to get onto Laughing Jack's box, who was very much enjoying the show. For the first time in 13 long years, a smile began to creep across Laughing Jack's face. And all of a sudden, a chuckle escaped his cold lips, and then another, and another, until Jack was cackling and howling with laughter from inside the sealed box. "Oh, what a wonderful, fascinating game!" Jack thought as he watched the motionless girl's blonde hair flow down with red with blood. As the adolescence began to mellow, Isaac realized he had to dispose of the body. He picked up the girl's lifeless corpse and plopped it onto the bed. He then left the room, closing the door behind him and locking it before leaving his house. He returned almost a full day later and re-entered the room, bringing him with me a metal garbage, and Oh yeah, a metal garbage which can, and his bag of unholy tools for work. He then cleared anything off the wooden desk and on the wall opposite the door, and dragged the bed with the bloody corpse in the middle of the room. This not only gave Isaac room to work, it also gave Laughing Jack a front row seat to the whole spectacle. Jack watched with a big, unfading grin as Isaac played this new game to the spoiled corpse, which Isaac was all set up. He got to work. First, he dumped out the contents of the big black tool bag onto his work table beside him. An assortment of knives, hammers, pikes, and other tools were now laid out before him. His first pick was a curved, unwholesomely knife, which he used to carefully skin the body. That skin was placed on racks to be stretched and turned to leather. Once it was all put in place, Isaac had used a handsaw to saw off the arms, legs, and head, disturbing the home with several families of maggots in the process. After filling the garbage bag with I was filling the garbage can with the bleach and other vile chemicals. He submerged the limbs until the meat was slipping off of the bones. Isaac finished, and the bones out of the sloppy corpse juice, placed them onto his workbench, and covered with a net. He brought the trash down outside to dump the rotten remains into London street sewers to be swept away into the harbor. For the next 3 days, Laughing Jack watched with wonderment as he inspired Isaac crafted the once human anatomy into a grotesque armchair abomination. The femur made up the back legs of the chair, while the tibia and the feet were still attached to the corpse was made into the front chair legs. A wooden frame was used for the base of the backing of the chair. However, the rim of the back was crafted using the spinal column, and the arm bones were used as the arms of the armchair. And where faced in replaced were some ribs. The now leathery flesh then swept onto the seat backing of the chair. The golden blonde hair was placed into a lining on the base, atop the armchair. From hell sat the skull. Once belonged to the girl who had the golden blonde hair, the sapphire eyes that and the smile that could melt one's heart. Isaac was quite pleased with his work, and Laughing Jack was quite impressed too by the old playmate's profound creativity. After that night, Isaac never touched another drop of alcohol again, for now possessed a much more macabre thirst. In the following weeks, Isaac made several improvements to his little workshop of horrors. He removed the mattress from the bed and put a row of thick wooden planks in its space. And then he fastened arm and leg restraints to the bottom and sides. This would mean he would be able to entertain his guests for a longer period of time while they were trying to rudely escape attempts. Isaac needed only one final thing before planning the entire grotesque party. He worked on it for a week straight, hand carving it out of wood. After a coat of white paint was applied, Isaac's creation was complete. It was a wooden mask, resembling that which would wear at a veterinarian masquerade ball. It had a furrowed brow and a long, toll-like nose. Troll-like nose, I meant to say, and would allow him to strike fear into the heart of his beloved guest. With his new face complete, and the room transformed into a bloody murder nest, it was finally time for Isaac Lee Grossman to bring home a new playmate. The following night, Laughing Jack watched as the masked Isaac Grossman stomped up the stairs, carrying with him a large burlap sack with his new guest withering within. He dumped the bag onto his torture bed, and out poured a bound, gagged, and very frightened young boy, probably only 5 or 6 years old. Isaac quickly untied the boy's bindings and held him down, restraining his arms and feet to the steel bed frame. Tears streamed endlessly down the boy's helpless little face as Isaac laid out his tools on the workbench. Isaac returned, wielding a pair of rusty pliers, and wasting no time, had slid the bottom jaw of the pliers under the boy's fingernails, right under the index finger, clamped tightly. The child's eyes quivered as he began muttering about under his gag, begging Isaac to let him go. Isaac smirked and slowly bent the pliers backwards, painfully prying off his first fingernail. The boy screamed through his gag as he withered in agony on the wooden boards. His finger began to gush with blood. Isaac then moved to the boy's middle finger, firmly grasping the nail with the rusty pliers. Once again, he jerked the pliers back, and this time the nail only tore off halfway. The boy yelled in pain as his finger twitched, shot blood, clamping half of the pliers off the nail. Isaac gave it another yank. The nail tore off, not without a good deal of skin tissue with it. Even Isaac was a bit repelled by the painful sight. Unlike the spying Laughing Jack, who was cackling with joy at the disturbing action it was witnessed with his old dusty box. Isaac returned to the wooden bench and swiped the pliers from the large iron hammer. He then made his way to the foot of the torture bed, where with one hand he held down the boy's leg. He raised the hammer high above his head as the boy cried and pleaded for mercy through the dirty gag. With all his might, Isaac slammed the hammer down onto the boy's bare kneecap, shattering the bone to gravel with a loud crack. The child convulsed in pain and shrill screams, muffling through the cloth gag tied around his face. As the child struggled in intense pain, Isaac placed the hammer down on the wooden bed and returned once more to the workbench to equip himself with a long, sharp knife. Without delay, he began to carve the words "useless worm" into the child's quivering chest. When he was finished, the boy was barely conscious. Isaac kneeled down and whispered in the boy's ear, "This is what happens to rotten kids who make nasty faces at people." The child's eyes filled with tears once again as Isaac began to carve the skin off of the boy's face. But to Isaac's surprise, the boy still clung to life. The mutilated child just stared up at Isaac with his big round eyes, which filled Isaac's black heart with rage and hatred. "Even without a face, you're still an ugly little shit," Isaac shouted as he picked up the hammer from the foot of the bed and began to bash the poor boy's skull in. He smashed over and over until it was nothing but a bloody, caved-in mess of flesh, pouring with thick, red blood and oozing out chunks of brain matter from across the room. Laughing Jack gleefully observed the grand finale, which had lived up to his expectations quite wonderfully. Isaac's next guest was a blind old woman who had invited him over for some tea. It took her almost 5 minutes to realize the chair she was just sitting in was carved using human remains, and another 6 minutes to find the stairs, only to topple down and flailing and screaming like a loon. Isaac decided to end the cruel joke with a simple ice pick through the eye socket. After that, he brought over a little girl who had force-fed broken glass before using her stomach as a punching bag. As weeks went by, more and more unlucky souls met their end by Isaac Grossman's attic, and the mad Grossman's personality became more dark and sadistic. Laughing Jack's personality followed suit, while he rotted within his dusty box, until one very cold December night, the rusty nails were holding up the self-forgotten knickknacks finally gave way, the whole thing plummeled to the ground. Isaac heard a loud thud from downstairs and decided to climb up to the attic to investigate. He walked across the blood-stained floor of the attic, overtowering the fallen bookshelf. Isaac brushed aside some of the trinkets and broken in the crash. He finally came across the jack-in-the-box from his childhood. Isaac barely recognized the old, tattered box. He picked it up and blew off of the dust. Then, for whatever nostalgic reason, he decided to grasp the box's rusty crank and began to turn it. A horribly off-key "Pop Goes the Weasel" crank from the torn-out old box. And as it reached its climax, Isaac sung along the final verse. "Pop goes the weasel." The top of the box swung open, but nothing happened. It was empty. Isaac expected as much, and he tossed the old box into the garbage, with the other broken knickknacks. After the mess was cleared up, he went to open the door to go back downstairs, but it was stuck. Isaac pulled hard, but the door wouldn't budge. Just then, he heard the most horrible, raspy voice call out his name from behind him. Isaac! A cloud of rot, a cold jolt ran down Isaac's spine, and the hairs on the back of his head stood up straight as he slowly turned around. All the way across the room by the garbage can stood the nightmarish laughing Jack. He was completely monochrome. His mangled black hair hung down in twisted locks. Sharp, jagged teeth discord in his twisted grin, and his arms hung down like a rag doll, his grotesquely long fingers nearly scraping the floor. Then, with a bone-chilling, raspy voice, the fiendish clown spoke. How nice it is to finally be free. Did you miss me, Isaac? Isaac was paralyzed in fear. But I thought you weren't real. Imaginary. Isaac stuttered. Jack replied with a long, horrifying cackle. Oh, I am quite real, kiddo. In fact, I've been watching such a long time for this day to come. Waiting so long. When I can play with my best friend for life one last time. Before Isaac could reply, Isaac's long arms stretched across the room and wrapped around Isaac's leg. The twisted clown began pulling him closer, dragging him into his own wooden torture bed as Isaac's fingernails scratched down on the floor. Ignoring the restraints, Jack swiftly grabbed 4 3-inch long iron nails from the workbench and pressed them straight into Isaac's hands and feet, nailing him to the wooden torture bed. Isaac growled in pain as he shouted in despair, "Ah, fuck you, goddamn clown-nosed freak!" Laughing Jack cackled as he forcibly held Isaac's head and placed starting. "If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all." Jack reached his long cooked fingers into Isaac's mouth, firmly grasping his tongue and stretching it out as far as it could go. The clown then reached back and grabbed a long, sharp knife from the table and slowly began to slice into the meat of Isaac's tongue. Once lopped off, Isaac's mouth began to overflow with blood. Isaac responded by shoving a small cylindrical metal tube through Isaac's throat to act as a temporary breathing hole. At this point, Isaac was already in great pain and had his eyes clenched shut to avoid them shrieking horrors that were being performed upon his body. "Oh, come on! It's no fun if you don't watch," Laughing Jack said playfully. But Isaac kept his eyes tightly shut. Laughing Jack sighed. Suit yourself. Jack then forcibly held one of Isaac's eyes as he reached back down to his long arm and took the long, pointy fish hook from the workbench. Slowly, Jack pushed the sharp end of the hook through the top eyelid and stared down to the bottom of his eyebrow and out the top, permanently pinning them open. Then he took out a second hook, pushing it through the bottom eyelid and pinning it to his cheek. Jack replaced it, and Jack repeated the process to the other eye, before long and a series of sharp metal hooks made sure Isaac wouldn't miss on any of the action. Laughing Jack then took the same knife he had used to lob off Isaac's tongue and began to focus on the removal of Isaac's limb. Jack carefully sliced two long strips of flesh down the underside of off of Isaac's upper and lower mouth, causing his teeth and gums to be completely exposed. His lips, I meant to say. Looks like someone hasn't been flossing regularly. Laughing Jack cackled under his breath as he reached back and grabbed the hammer. Isaac attempted to mutter some kind of beg for mercy. However, only gargled moans escaped his throat. Jack raised the hammer into the air, and with a twisted grin, he dropped the hammer and began to howl with laughter as it tore open Isaac's shirt. Taking the sharpest knife, Jack cut straight into Isaac's chest and all the way down past his stomach. Isaac groaned with the sharp, stinging pain of the monochrome monster wormed his wretched fingers underneath the skin on Isaac's chest, peeling it back as he was about to perform his horrible live autopsy. Jack began to pull out Jack's intestines in the same manner a magician would pull out several folds of colorful cloth out of his pocket. Then, on the snipping off the small length of intestines, Jack pressed one end against his cold black lips and began to blow air into the foul organ. Once inflated, then twisted it up and shaped into a poodle with a long, cackling exclaimed, "I can do giraffes too!" Isaac remained still in pain and shock as the clown creature greatly placed the macabre balloon animal beside Isaac's head. For his next trick, Laughing Jack reached down onto Isaac's open stomach cavity and yanked out one of his kidneys. Holding it in his hands, he turned to his captive friend, shrugging, saying, Kidneys really aren't my thing." Tossing the organ aside, Laughing Jack noticed Isaac was beginning to drift to death. "Feeling tired already? Why, we're nearly at the grand finale." Jack exclaimed and reached into his sleeve and pulled out a long, oblong needle. "This ought to perk you right up," Jack shouted as he slammed the needle into Isaac's rectangular, and injected the liquid right into his eye socket. Jack swung and twisted the needle further into his old playmate's eyeball. As Isaac was reeling back into his life, he was feeling the sharp needle scraping the back of his eye socket. With a sinister cackle, Jack yanked the needle out, pulling the eyeball out with it. Isaac's right eye now hung out of its socket. By the eye slot, it was dripping down the side of his face. Jack smirked. "Well, now that I have your full attention." The insidious clown then took his long cooked index fingers and poked a hole in Isaac's stomach. Jack lowered his head towards the open chest cavity and stretched his mouth wide open. Within seconds, a torrent of filthy cockroaches started crawling out of the clown's gullet, splitting into Isaac's open chest. Each vile roach crawled up and pushed their way into the small openings in Isaac's stomach, filling it up to the brim full of disgusting, wriggling bugs. As his stomach became bloated with bugs, the roaches began scurrying up his throat, squeezing their way out of his mouth and nasal cavity. Isaac was inches from death when his captor kneeled down to him and spoke into his ear. "It's been a blast, kiddo, but it looks out our time together is about up. No need for tears, though, because I plan to spread my friendship to all the lonely kids of the world." And with that said, Laughing Jack reached into Isaac's chest and yanked out his beating heart. As his life bled out into the cold wooden bed, Isaac's life flashed before his eyes. He saw his mother, his father, the boarding school, his victims, and the last thought that fluttered through his mind was the very special Christmas when he woke up to find the beautifully carved wooden box that contained his very first friend. There are rumors that when the police finally found Isaac Grossman's rotten, maggot-infested corpse weeks later on Christmas Eve, that even though the face was bashed and torn to bits, he almost looked happy.
And that was the story of the origin story of Laughing Jack, read by Carmo, the Bun Bun,
Yeah.
known TikToker and live streamer.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for next time.